Welcome to Eurasia on the Move, the podcast series that deals with current trends and developments in the Eurasia region, so the countries of Central Asia, the Southern Caucasus, and Eastern Europe. What is happening in these countries, for example regarding civil society, democratization, the rule of law, and human rights? We talk to experts who are closely monitoring developments that move the region. This helps us to better understand these developments, how they affect the region, and what that means for the European Union's relations with the countries. This podcast is hosted by the Eurasia Lab Fellowship program, organized by the Institut für Europäische Politik in Berlin.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Eurasia on the Move. I am Yvonne Braun and I will be your host for this episode, where we will have a closer look at the EU's anti-corruption promotion in the Republic of Moldova. The country is sought by widespread corruption that has detrimental consequences for its internal developments and the EU integration process. The EU and the Council of Europe are two of the most active external actors in the area of anti-corruption and recognize it as a key factor in the development of its relations with Moldova. In order to learn more about this topic, I have invited two of our fellows of the Eurasia Lab Fellowship program, Mihai Corman and Eliana Coraci from the Moldovan German Forum in Chisinau. Thanks for being with us today, Mihai and Eliana. In order to get a clearer picture of the situation in Moldova, what can you tell us about the general level and effects of corruption in the country?
Thank you, Yvonne. I think it's fair to say that corruption is one of the biggest, if not the biggest challenge for Moldova's development. Both low and high-level corruption are widespread and endemic. Just to give you a few examples. In 2016, the loss of GDP due to corruption was higher than all the expenses for pension and social security in that year. Or in 2017, over 40% of the population declared to have paid a bribe in public services, and the volume of those bribes is higher than all the expenses on roads in that year. It's not difficult to imagine that these numbers contribute to Moldovan citizens' deep-seated mistrust of state institutions and deter foreign investments. Around 200,000 people left the country in the last 15 years, and it is also worth mentioning here that according to recent polls, almost half of the country's youth mentions corruption among the main reasons they wish to leave Moldova. In conclusion, corruption has far-reaching consequences for Moldovan citizens' lives, the future of the country, and also stands against the EU's interests in security and stability at its borders.
Okay, wow, that sounds quite intense. Can you give maybe some concrete examples of any cases of corruption, if that's possible?
Yes, two of the most known money laundering schemes that took place in Moldova are the Russian laundromat and the banking fraud scandal. The Russian laundromat took place between 2010 and 2014. It was a fraud scheme that successfully managed to move $70 billion out of Russia, laundering them mostly through Moldova. The banking fraud scandal took place in 2014. It was a money laundering scheme that led to the disappearance of $1 billion from the Moldovan banking system. This represented, at the time, 12% of the Moldovan GDP. These money laundering schemes were achieved through a web of toxic loans and asset swaps and have only been possible because of corruption schemes and the complicity of the political elite and the judicial system.
Okay, thank you very much for outlining the situation in the country. So, how is the EU involved in tackling these issues?
Well, thank you very much, Yvonne, for this question, and thank you very much for having us also from my side. Well, in our project, we basically focus on two anti-corruption actors. We focus on the European Union, and we also focus on the Council of Europe. And as regards the EU, I think three particular instruments or mechanisms, if you wish, stand out. One instrument through which the EU tries to address corruption in Moldova is the so-called process of legislative approximation. The EU-Moldova Association Agreement obliges Moldova to incorporate in its national legislation EU anti-corruption standards and norms in a variety of areas and to apply these standards in practice. This is particularly evident, for example, in the DCFTA part of the association agreement, which is the so-called deep and comprehensive free trade area. And this is the part of the association agreement that aims at Moldova's economic integration into the EU internal market. While the DCFTA primarily aims at liberalizing both the EU's and Moldova's markets and creating a level playing field for all market participants, it also contains transparency, accountability, integrity, and also non-discrimination standards. To regularly check the progress of this legislative approximation process, the EU conducts regular so-called on-the-spot missions that are foreseen in the association agreement and issues monitoring reports, such as the association implementation reports. And a second mechanism through which the EU tries to fight corruption in the country is conditionality. To incentivize Moldova to approximate its legislation to EU standards and norms, the EU connects reform conditions to certain benefits, or carrots, if you will. Obviously, an attractive carrot for Moldova is access to the EU internal market. Consequently, Moldova gains gradual access to the internal market only if it adopts and enforces EU standards and norms. Another important incentive is financial assistance. And again, the amount of money that the EU is willing to disperse to Moldova depends on Moldova's willingness to reform efforts, including in the area of anti-corruption. And last but not least, although it's not covered by our research project, the EU strongly supports the civil society sector in Moldova. While large parts of EU funds go straight into Moldova's budget, the EU also funds a variety of capacity building projects that aim to create a vibrant and resilient civil society in the country that is ready and equipped to stand up against corruption.
A second important anti-corruption actor that we look at is the Council of Europe, which sets standards at pan-European level. Moldova has been a full-fledged member of the Council of Europe since 1995, and as a consequence, it is a signatory party to all the major Council of Europe anti-corruption legal instruments. But more importantly, Moldova is a member of the so-called Group of States Against Corruption, or GRECO. Since 1999, GRECO has been regularly monitoring compliance of its member countries with the far-reaching anti-corruption standards of the Council of Europe. Now, in contrast to the EU, which tackles corruption in Moldova, having at its disposal legally binding instruments and so-called carrots to incentivize Moldova's convergence to EU values and norms, GRECO operates on the basis of peer pressure and mutual persuasion, which is underpinned by a dynamic process of mutual evaluation. GRECO operates on the basis of strict monitoring procedures, at the end of which it issues recommendations against corruption that member countries, including Moldova, have to fulfill. Since 2001, GRECO has conducted 4 evaluation rounds in Moldova and assessed a staggering range of anti-corruption issues. This system of peer pressure and mutual persuasion has achieved a remarkable acceptance rates internationally. This cooperative and non-adversarial atmosphere is precisely what has made GRECO a uniquely efficient anti-corruption monitoring mechanism in Europe. GRECO has managed to achieve a surprisingly high rate of compliance with the legally non-binding Council of Europe anti-corruption standards.
Okay, I see. Thank you very much. There are already quite a lot of mechanisms in place to tackle corruption in Moldova. What I was wondering is how you've become interested in the topic of anti-corruption promotion, especially EU anti-corruption promotion, and have you always been working particularly on the case of Moldova?
In my case, I started my research on the European neighbourhood policy during my first master in 2016, and with time I zoomed in on the Eastern Partnership and then on Moldova specifically. I always found very fascinating the interdependence between the EU and its neighborhoods. This is not a donor-receiver kind of relationship. The EU is well aware that it has to choose between exporting stability to its neighborhood or importing instability from it. Moldova is an interesting case study. On the one hand, it was the first Eastern Partnership country to satisfy the requirements for a visa-free regime. On the other hand, the country still has much to do in terms of fight against corruption and the stabilization of its financial system. I wish to continue my research on Moldova, and my next project will be on disinformation and media literacy.
Okay, what about you, Mihai?
Yeah, well, as for myself, as I'm originally from Moldova, I guess an interest in this country was basically put into my cradle. And my interest in the topic corruption and anti-corruption resulted, I think, from the realization that corruption is one of the biggest challenges in Moldova, and its effects are, as we described, truly devastating. So I believe that whoever will contribute to solving this issue holds a piece of the key to establishing a prosperous, peaceful, and European Moldova.
Okay, so your interest in this topic has been there for quite a long time, I see. Thank you to both of you for telling us about this. Now, coming to your current research project, what is the aim of your research project and what methodology have you chosen?
As of the aim, the main research objective of our project is to identify the underlying factors that favor EU anti-corruption promotion in Moldova. The project focuses on the alleged gap between the EU's self-proclaimed ambition to tackle corruption and its actual anti-corruption capability, meaning its ability to monitor and enforce the adoption and implementation of anti-corruption rules. More specifically, the project focuses on two distinct anti-corruption areas: tackling corruption in the funding of political parties and the policy area against fraud for the protection of the EU's financial interest. We chose these two areas because they display specific features that allow us to attain the objectives and answer the question of our research project. As of the methodology, we conduct desk research, including a synthesis of relevant legal and political science literature and black letter law research. The project also draws on primary and secondary sources in English and Romanian, including EU and Moldovan official documents and media reports. Moreover, the research draws on semi-structured interviews with high-level EU and Moldovan policymakers and advisors, with the goal to find information that is not available elsewhere and to triangulate data.
Okay, I see. Quite a lot of work to do. Are there already any preliminary results that you can share with us?
Well, as we're not quite at the end of our research project, our findings at this moment are not yet complete. But what we can already say, and I think this will be part of our final conclusions as well, is that the EU's ability to monitor and enforce anti-corruption rules in Moldova is indeed limited. However, we also observed a variance of the EU's anti-corruption capability across different areas. In the policy area against fraud for the protection of the EU's financial interests, which is one of the more technical areas that we analyze, the EU has significant anti-corruption standards as well as sophisticated monitoring and enforcement mechanisms towards Moldova. And this can clearly be seen in the EU-Moldova Association Agreement, for instance, which is the core legal instrument governing EU-Moldova relations. What is interesting, though, is that this policy area is heavily regulated by the EU acquis communautaire, which is the entire body of common rights and obligations that are binding on all EU countries. This means that internally, within its borders, the EU has strong legal competences and far-reaching legal instruments. In other words, the EU has legal templates that it can draw on externally in its relations with Moldova. One such internal legal instrument that the EU heavily draws on when establishing anti-corruption standards vis-à-vis Moldova is the EU Convention on the Protection of the European Community's Financial Interests. In contrast, in the area against illegal party funding, which is a politically highly sensitive and at the same time highly relevant area for a democratic state, the EU acquis amounts to exactly zero. EU member states' rules on political party funding resemble a patchwork carpet. Each EU country has its own rules, and there is no common approach at EU level. Interestingly, though, in the external context, EU benchmarks vis-à-vis Moldova in this area adopt a more, well, let's say, intuitive approach towards benchmarking. Anti-corruption standards are vague and superficial. And the EU largely refers to the standards established by other normative-based international organizations, such as, for example, the Council of Europe. So in conclusion, while we are not yet at the end of our research, I think it's fair to say that In non-acquis related, politically highly sensitive areas, such as the political party funding, EU anti-corruption capability in Moldova is low. In highly acquis intensive technocratic areas, such as the policy area against fraud for the protection of youth financial interests, EU anti-corruption capability in Moldova is high.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing these results. And even if you're not done with your research, I guess these are already very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing with us. Mihai, you mentioned the EU's limitations when it comes to tackling corruption. Do you have any recommendations for the EU's engagement to overcome these limitations?
Well, again, at the end of our research project, I think we will be able to come up with a more comprehensive set of recommendations for the EU's engagement. For now, we'd like to limit ourselves to basically 2 recommendations. Our first recommendation is a product of one of our more basic conclusions, which results from what I've just said. The EU is only as strong outside its borders as it is strong within. So we think that it is of paramount importance that in areas where the EU does neither have the necessary legislative templates nor the required experience and expertise, such as in the area against illegal political party funding. So we think that it's paramount that in these areas, the EU develops its anti-corruption acquis first before engaging in any sorts of anti-corruption activities externally. In these areas, the EU should cooperate more closely with normative-based international organizations that do have long-standing experience and do have the necessary instruments. And this includes, in our opinion, first and foremost, the Council of Europe and related institutions such as the Venice Commission. And a second recommendation that we'd like to bring forward is that the EU should primarily focus on those areas where it can have the biggest impact. This means it should focus on tackling corruption in sectors where it disposes of a strong acquis and clearly defined legislative templates. This includes the policy area against fraud for the protection of youth financial interests, but this also includes the internal market-related areas, where the EU traditionally has a strong acquis communautaire. And at the same time, the EU must not raise unjustified expectations in areas where it has neither the required instruments nor the needed expertise.
Thank you. I would say these are already quite comprehensive recommendations, but I'm looking very much forward to hear further recommendations. So, in addition to the EU, do you see any other actors, frameworks, or programs as an alternative or an additional aid to further promote anti-corruption efforts in Moldova?
Well, Ivona, it's actually interesting that you asked this question because only 1 month ago I finished a project on the opportunities and challenges of mTender, which is the electronic public procurement platform in Moldova. And as is the case within the EU, public procurement in Moldova is extremely prone to corruption due to the large amounts of money involved. So together with 2 other colleagues, we wanted to find out how effective the use of electronic means in the preparation, conduct, and evaluation of public procurement procedures are to curb corruption. And in the course of this project, I spoke to 22 people from different Moldovan and international stakeholder institutions. And one of the more important discoveries that I made was that there are plenty of highly engaged and competent actors that are actively developing solutions to tackle corruption in the country. And 3 of the major actors that significantly flank the EU's anti-corruption agenda include the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, or EBRD, that has been leading the development and establishment of mTender, the World Bank, that is about to issue the much expected country procurement assessment report for Moldova, and last but not least, the German Agency for International Cooperation, or GIZ, that is currently implementing a project co-financed by the German government and the EU on strengthening the rule of law and anti-corruption mechanisms in Moldova.
I know that you plan to disseminate your research findings to a wider audience. Who exactly are you trying to reach and why is that?
We want to present the research findings of our project to a series of 5 podcasts that will be disseminated weekly this June. Podcasts are popular for various reasons. One of them is that they allow for multitasking, as they can be listened to while running, cooking, or commuting. But most importantly, they are accessible to anyone with a smartphone. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, but since the beginning of the pandemic, I find myself listening to more and more podcasts. We are trying to expand our reach to those who are intellectually curious and willing to learn more, but that would not necessarily taken the time to read a paper. And of course, we wish to tap into the network and the significant outreach potential of the IEP. This is a great opportunity for us to spread the word about EU anti-corruption efforts in Moldova.
I totally agree. That's basically also why we are doing this podcast here. I think, we will be hearing from you quite soon, as you said, in June with your podcast, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
The Research Project, in 3 words.
So now, let me ask you this question. How would you describe your research project in 3 words, and why would you choose those 3 words?
Ooh, 3 words. Okay. Well, I think that if we had to choose 3 words, maybe we would describe our project as certainly policy relevant, innovative, and I think also topical. And let us just briefly describe what we mean by these 3 words. When it comes to policy relevance, well, as we already had the opportunity to say, our research project has the objective of identifying the underlying factors that favor EU anti-corruption promotion in Moldova. So our project hopes to bring new policy relevant findings to the table, contributing to rethinking and reprioritizing EU anti-corruption promotion. And concretely, the research wants to accentuate the strengths of the EU as a key anti-corruption actor in Moldova and advocate in favor of a downgrading of EU ambitions and also expectations vis-à-vis the EU, and a more intensive cooperation between the EU and the Council of Europe in areas where the EU lacks the capability to tackle corruption.
And what do we mean by innovative? Now, as Mihai said, our research is policy relevant and innovative in its content. While we focus on a topic and an angle that is largely unexplored, what I'm referring to when I say innovative is rather the medium. We will present our research through a podcast. Now, not many research projects present their output with a podcast. In most cases, it's through a paper or another written form. What we realize is that, as said before, a paper is only going to reach those who are already interested in the topic and take the time to read it through. Using a podcast allows us to reach a wider audience, targeting young people and growing awareness on the EU's anti-corruption promotion in Moldova.
Maybe I'll just continue with the last with description of our last words. So what we mean by topical is that as the main objective of our project is to find new ways to tackle rampant corruption in Moldova, which continues to be a very pressing and topical issue in the country, and on which I think we believe the future of the country depends. We think that our topic indeed is very topical. And as I said earlier, those who contribute to solving this issue hold a piece of the key to establishing a prosperous, peaceful, and also European Moldova.
Okay, thank you very much for breaking down your research project into 3 words. I know it's not easy, especially not for researchers, but thank you very much.
A word of advice for junior researchers.
Now, coming to my last question. You probably know, if you've listened to our previous episodes, that it kind of became established at the end of each of our podcast episodes to give tips to junior researchers who are working on a similar topic in countries of the Eurasia region. So what would your personal advice be to fellow researchers?
Yes, we did, and we discussed about it. So we would like to give 2 pieces of advice to fellow researchers working on Eurasia. The first is to create a network. Best things do not usually happen in isolation. You're going to need a team or like-minded people that can listen to your ideas, give you sound advice, and provide you with much needed inspiration. This is what programs like the Eurasia Lab offer you, so make sure you are aware of such initiatives that can help you find a larger research community. And second, don't be afraid to think outside of the box and try out something new. After all, innovation is key to research.
Thank you, Eliana, for these very precious words of advice. What you mentioned with isolation, I guess that's highly topical during this current pandemic. So I hope that with this podcast and with our work that we're doing with the Eurasia Lab and Fellowship program, that we can contribute a little bit, to networking in times of the pandemic and to overcome this kind of isolation. So thank you very much to the two of you for being with us for this episode today. I personally found the insights you gave into the developments in Moldova and also your research very interesting. And I guess we will all be listening to your podcast very soon. As I said, I'm very much looking forward to it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Yvonne, for having us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we hope you will all listen to our podcast.
That's it for this episode of Eurasia on the Move. Today, we learned more about the EU's anti-corruption policy in Moldova and its effects in the country. You can follow updates on Mihai's and Eliana's research project on IAP's website. This podcast episode was produced by Yvonne Braun, David Gottheit, and Marlise Murray. Our special thanks goes to today's guests, Mihai Corman and Eliana Coraci. We hope you enjoyed learning about our work at the Eurasia Lab and Fellowship program and our Fellows research projects. Make sure to keep in touch with our work on IAP's website. Thank you very much for listening.